Because narcissists are such masters at manipulation and at advantaging other people's vulnerabilities, transition moments in a person present a great opportunity to idealize, seduce, isolate, then gaslight, devalue, and discard. Listen to this idea. If it affects you, drop it in the comments or something. Narcissist, have any of you ever, or are any of you from a narcissistic family who actually kind of tried to love bomb you after you made some real money? So let's say it's a situation is you start making money. You start making a lot of money, okay? Whatever a lot of money to you and your family is. You get a bonus, or your company goes public, or your idea goes viral, or maybe you even get a settlement in a lawsuit. Maybe you finish school and you start a really well-paying job right out of school, especially like law school or med school, whatever it is. You make money. I want to keep ideas of like winning money out of this or marrying someone who has money, because that's a different vibe. For this video, I'm specifically talking money that largely came out of your work. We could do the luck-based money on another video, right? I'm not talking millions, but for some of you that might mean millions. But it's an amount of money that definitely represents a jump up. It may be thousands, it may be tens of thousands, but it's an amount, something that would be noticed as a bit of a game changer in whatever your family, your system, your world is about, okay? So you earn this money. I don't know how you did it. Maybe through hard work, maybe a little bit of good timing. Like I said, drop it in the comments if this happened to you. My question is, how did your narcissistic family system react when you started making that money? Here's my guess, is that it was weird and confusing and moderately unsettling. Money matters to narcissistic people a lot. Money means power, validation, bragging rights, superficial stuff like cars and clothes and stuff. So if you are making more now, it moves the power scales, and your family system may not like it. This weirdness can be magnified, for example, if you were not the golden child. If you make this money and originally you were the scapegoat, or you're an invisible child, and now you're succeeding financially. So let's just break this down. Let's break down some of the typical reactions you might get if you start making lots of money and you're from a narcissistic family system. First, your family may attempt to actually love bomb you. Once word of your good news gets out, of course, my guidance is that you don't let your narcissistic family system know, but information gets around, especially in this time of social media, so they may find out either way. But they find out, and you may find them paying more attention to you, sending you relatively love-bomby texts, asking you to come around, have dinner, hang out, just being nice. This can be really unsettling if you weren't the one to tell them about your good fortune, but clearly they found out some other way. But the full court press that is love bombing may happen. It's not just for lovers, and the fact of the matter is it can feel really uncomfortable because that's not what you're used to. Second, then you can plan on some manipulation. And this may come out most often around what they feel you owe them. We did so much for you. Do you remember how we did this and did that and drove you there and gave you that and helped with your first car? They may do everything short of pulling out a spreadsheet showing everything they did for you, from the bottles of baby food they once bought you to perhaps college tuition. This will also be very uncomfortable. And reality check, and this is solely my opinion, it's not some grand psychological law, I'm a pretty big believer that children don't owe their parents anything. A child may want to do for their parents, and I say this as a parent, I don't expect a damn thing from my children. I hope they go out into the world and succeed brilliantly and enjoy it all without feeling that they owe me a thing. When we have children, it's our choice. And good parenting means raising children who can go on to be autonomous adults who get to be their own people. Children to me are not meant to be an annuity that owes us anything. Well, narcissistic family systems, however, are very entitled systems. People in narcissistic family systems, and not just parents, siblings too, they feel entitled to whatever they wanted. As far as your parents were concerned, they felt entitled to whatever they wanted from you as a child. And everyone still feels entitled, especially if you go on to succeed. They may literally feel entitled to your material success, and that doesn't feel good. Third, then you're going to go into the victimhood phase. If your parents or siblings, none of them are having the kind of success that you're experiencing, you may hear things like, "Oh, I worked so hard. Oh, it was a different time and people like me didn't get paid what they were worth." Or, "I guess one more time I'm just reminded that life is not fair." Or, "Your brother has never had it as easy as you. You don't owe me anything, but I do hope you remember that your success may make him feel bad, so maybe you should help him out." Narcissistic people are brilliant at, in fact, it's what they do, at blame shifting and at victimhood taking, and especially if you have vulnerable/covert narcissistic people in your family, you may find that your success becomes about their disappointments, and it can be very easy to fall into the pit of feeling bad for them. Then fourth, you may start seeing in them the vacillation between hoovering and anger. If their plays at manipulation and victimhood don't work, and you aren't just handing them over money or doing what they ask, they will go back and forth between anger, because all roads lead to anger and rage for a narcissistic person who is not getting their way, and then hoovering, because you are still a source of supply that they want to get. It may sadly feel reminiscent of childhood, when you weren't sure if you were going to get the nice parent or the angry one. If they don't get their way, they believe that you are winning and not giving them what they feel entitled to. Then that's when you're going to see anger. Fifth, family roles matter. When the golden child is the one who succeeds financially, in most family systems, sadly, that's sort of a case of the puzzle pieces fitting, and golden children, who probabilistically are more likely to share some of the narcissistic traits, may still be submerged in the family system and still keep playing the family's narcissistic game if they succeed. But when the scapegoat, invisible child, fixer, truth seer, or helper is the one who succeeds, it's a different game, especially the scapegoat. And personally, nothing makes me happier than when I see the scapegoat go out there and succeed brilliantly. But in a way, when these subjugated roles like the scapegoat succeed, that is when, in many ways, you are upsetting the apple cart of the tenuous narcissistic family system. And the family may believe that they're more likely to be able to manipulate a scapegoat. And then enabling matters too. Patterns within the family that involve enabling the narcissistic family member, and that narcissistic family member could be a parent, a grandparent, a sibling. So the narcissistic family system enables that person, and when they kind of come at you with their manipulative nonsense about your success, and it's all very entitled, right? Well, those enably folks may chime in and basically say, "Yeah, you do owe your parent and all of us." It's sort of a greedy troop of manipulative flying monkeys at that point. So the bigger question you're wondering, what are you supposed to do? Succeeding in any way, financially or otherwise, after growing up in a narcissistic family system is not easy. So many voices in your head about not enough, imposter syndrome, doubting yourself, means that your climb was steeper. However, it also amazes me how much empathy survivors of these narcissistic family systems have, even though they often were not given enough as children. That empathy can be tricky because you may feel obligated to your family, especially if they did do things like help with tuition, or if they actually did have their own difficult backstories financially. That's fine. For any of you, it's important you do what feels right. However, the piece that you've got to gird yourself against is to remember that nothing you do will ever be enough. If you give a certain amount of money, there will always be the sense of, why didn't you do more? Give more. And if you are to spend on yourself, there may also be the, well, you got yourself a nice house and your sister's still paying rent, as though you can't or you don't get to live your life and enjoy your earnings until everyone in your family system gets what they want. Well, that's impossible. It'll never be enough. So don't deplete yourself in your finances trying to do that. If you want to support your family in any way, that's on you, but recognize you give what works for you. And as I said, in an ideal world, you don't tell them your success. Remember the rule of managing any narcissistic person. Don't share good news, don't share bad news, and stick to the weather and the price of milk. It is so tempting, though, to share the good news. The trauma-bonded cycles can mean that even when we think we have narcissism all figured out, we're still trying to win over narcissistic parents. Look, Mom, look, Dad, I did good. Look how much money I make. Try and curb that impulse, hard as it may be. However, again, in our social media influenced world, they're likely going to find out somehow. So be prepared for these cycles: love bombing, hoovering, manipulation, and the big blame shifted mess it could be. The entitlement of narcissistic family systems means that they're never going to take responsibility for the harm they did to you. But if your fortunes swing in the good direction, I can promise you this: they're going to be there, hat in hand. So let's talk a little bit about this idea that people who are going through some kind of life transition are sort of unique narcissist magnets. Now, transitions in life can take many different forms. A move to a new town, a new city, or even to a new country. A change of job or a change of career. Adjusting to life after a divorce or breakup of a long-term relationship. Adjusting to life after the death of someone close to you. The birth of a child. Child moving out of the house. Adjusting to an illness. For example, having to stop working as a result of having had a major illness or a surgery or something like that. A major loss, like losing your home in a fire or having experienced a major car accident or a natural disaster. During these transitional periods, you will find yourself a bit off kilter or off balance. You may not have your usual routines in place that support you, or may not have the people around you who have always been a sounding board. In the case of transitions, people are often adjusting to new normals and almost having to sort of shape their identities around this new situation. And when you're going through a transition, because of all this, it's distracting. When it's life as usual, we are often on autopilot. So when something new happens, we can give it more attention since the other stuff is already wired. But when we are in these transitional periods, we're getting used to so many new things. We're getting used to new routines, and as such, we may not be able to process new information as easily. In addition, especially when we look at people who are very vulnerable or more vulnerable, major transitions can sometimes leave us feeling like we're somehow lacking. I mean, even when it's a good transition. For example, you may get sort of a new and exciting job, a job that you've always hoped for, but you may be worried you may not be able to do it well. You obviously were qualified, but your old voices, your old demons are bothering you. So the short answer, though, is transitions are messy. So why are people who are going through transitions so often sucked into narcissistic relationships? I mean, the brief answer is that at those times, as I've noted, you're distracted and you're often vulnerable. Now, for example, I have had numerous people tell me that they fell into their long-term narcissistic relationships when they were adjusting, or when they were in, or adjusting to, I should say, a medical crisis. The charming narcissist came around, and the narcissist was probably sensing their vulnerability due to the illness. And when people go through medical crises, they often feel like they're less than. They may feel less attractive. They may feel less strong, less vibrant, less able to do things, less themselves. And in all cases, they said of feeling more infirm, and because they felt they felt less attractive. They became prime targets, I should say, for a narcissist who charmed them, especially when they were telling them things like they're attractive. And what it happened was it became this unique opportunity for the narcissist to control them and manipulate them. And in many cases, the person who got sucked into the relationship said, I felt lucky that anyone was even paying attention to me, so I didn't feel like I should say anything when the red flags popped up. These people would often see the red flags and felt disempowered because they felt lucky that anyone was willing to be with them while they were in the midst of this illness. Now, a similar issue comes up when you are in a geographically new place. You may not have the benefit of routines, family, friends, or other familiar supports. You may be starting a new job or starting at a new school, and as a result of that, you're really out of your element and perhaps more vulnerable without having not only sounding boards, but your usual touchstones and routines and coffee shops you go to. And so many people will say that they were more vulnerable when they met their narcissist because they were in a new place and they were just getting acclimated, which was an ideal moment for a narcissist to insinuate himself or herself into their lives. Your radar just isn't as good when you are more vulnerable. Times of transition may render us vulnerable, but they also may be times when we find ourselves deciding we're going to reinvent ourselves. And you may have actually had decent instincts during your transition, but then that idea of trying something new or being someone different may result you in muting your instincts. And as a result, you may also miss red flags. Say, I'm going to try dating out of my type. If your type was healthy, that could be dangerous. Now, narcissists will also often capitalize on people who are going through loss, death or divorce, loss of some other significant family, estrangement from a family, or other major financial shift. There is such a vulnerability during times of grief, and this may also be confusing for you. This can be particularly potent if this is your first time dating after a long marriage. It's prime territory for a person who may have been out of the dating game for a long time to make excuses for the narcissist on the basis of, I haven't been out meeting people for a while. I haven't been out there. Maybe I just don't get how it works. In fact, when narcissists do their sort of early intel gathering and grilling you for information early in the relationship, those stories of loss you may share with them will often hook them in because it gives them a place of vulnerability to anchor into, to climb in, and then successfully gaslight you. Because narcissists are such masters at manipulation and at advantaging other people's vulnerabilities, transition points in transition moments in a person present a great opportunity to idealize, seduce, isolate, then gaslight, devalue, and discard. It just gives them it gives a great entry point for them. It's also easy to see why at times of transitions, especially professional transitions, for example, for school or work or military service or even just geographically, that it is easier to fall into narcissistic workplace situations. The change in life, in location, in residence can be distracting, and the new boss or supervisor or mentor can often take advantage of that vulnerability in you, and you can easily slide into a professionally problematic place and get into a rather abusive, toxic work relationship. The toxic cycles of a narcissistic relationship can play out in a more extreme way during transition. The love bombing can be more overwhelming if you are far from familiar things, and you might not even just have a way to turn that off. And the love bombing may give you a sense of belonging to something at a time when you don't have a sense of belonging. The devaluing can be even more destabilizing because, once again, you may not have the same kinds of supports or routine, and you may be even more confused by the gaslighting. And you may really fight the discard because these transitional periods can leave you feeling very vulnerable. So, what do you do? What do you do with these periods of transition? Because these can be exciting times. First, be extra careful during times of transition. A sweeping love affair when you're in a new city or at a new place in your life can feel very exciting. But try and see it through a bit of a temporary lens. Do not let your instincts be muted or left behind as a result of your move or even a loss or an illness. Red flags are red flags. Be careful that your transitional time does not result in color blindness and that you miss them. Pace yourself during transitions and be circumspect about whether this is the optimal time to enter into multiple new things in your life. Let your transition be your singular focus and let it settle in. And beware of things that move too quickly. A signature characteristic of many narcissistic relationships is that they move too quickly. The narcissist will sometimes want to move in too fast, get engaged too fast, get married too fast, move to another place too fast. This too fast can be confusing, and it can lead you to take your eye off doing the more deliberate and painstaking work of creating awareness of the other person and their patterns and their behaviors. In the majority of cases, especially those in narcissistic close relationships, those folks will talk about how it was all so fast, fast, fast. And that can almost force a transition in your life. In fact, the fast, fast, fast of a narcissistic relationship can often lead you then to move to a new place and commit to a new life. So it's a transition on top of a transition. But you also need to be aware of your scripts of being not enough. Transitions can often heighten those scripts because you are trying something new. You're living somewhere new. You're coping with something new and potentially difficult. And in that not enoughness, it is easy to allow people in or hear and listen to people who reinforce that sense of our being not enough. Listen, transitions are important pivot points in our lives and can often reflect a major issue that we are managing at that time. At times, a transition could be around good things, like a new, exciting job. They can be about bad things, like an illness or recovery from an injury. But think of it this way. Ourselves in those transitions deserve all of our attention, so we can find our stride and recalibrate our radar so we can remain aware of red flags and garner support that hopefully also help us to not fall for those red flags. Transitions are incredibly powerful times, and I am struck by how many people told me they met their narcissist when they lived in a new city, they met their narcissist right after a difficult divorce, they met their narcissist when they were in the midst of an illness. These are times of vulnerability, there are times of change, there are times when your eye is not on the ball. And that's where I'm telling you is that slow down, put the brakes on when you're in a transitional period and pay attention. The quicksilver, quick, fast fashion of the narcissistic relationship can often lead you to want to feel safe, to feel anchored, to feel part of something when you're in a new place or in an unfamiliar headspace. But catch yourself, because really, this is a time, transition is a time when you need to focus on yourself. So people who are in transitional spaces are major narcissist magnets. There's no two ways around it. And so when you're at these times, reflect on it, because it definitely could be that you get sucked into something where you don't have supports around you, so that even when you do start identifying those red flags, there can often feel like you don't feel empowered to do that much with it. You're in a crisis. It may be a sudden crisis. It may be an ongoing crisis. It could be a sudden death in a family or an accident. It could be a catastrophic illness. in someone that you weren't prepared for, or some kind of emergency that comes up quick or comes up really big and changes everything. Because we typically aren't prepared at these times, right? Because it does come up big and fast. When help comes, we take it. It's full bore trauma response, survival response time. That's what we do. And when we're fully into survival, discernment tends to take a back seat. So then in the midst of this crisis, help comes. It may come from someone that you aren't particularly fond of, maybe don't know very well, but may not even really like that much. And maybe you've even gotten narcissistic-y or antagonistic-y or just icky vibes from them. They may be the person in a family system that's the chronic family oxygen sucker or the chronic victim, but for whatever reason, they're the ones offering what you need at that moment. It could be anything. It could be a place to stay. It could be logistical support. It could be a ride. It could be a meal. It could be a little bit of money, whatever it is. And you take it. And while crises can have really long tails of grief behind them and life change and healing after them, after the acute stage of a crisis passes, and that's usually about 4 to 6 weeks, frankly, we tend to adjust to whatever the new state of affairs is. We don't go back to normal. We go to whatever life is like after this crisis. And even sooner than that, though, 4 to 6 weeks, that desperation help that you took from someone, if it came from someone narcissistic or someone sort of narcissistic adjacent, you can now be found in the midst of your having to go through this crisis. You can find yourself in a really problematic dynamic because this person whose help you desperately needed and took because you desperately needed it and it was there. At the time, you might even look back and say, I was even a bit effusive, a bit funny, maybe even overly grateful for. You may even have felt or feel beholden to them. Not just like a quid pro quo that I owe you, but more of a, I can't be mad at them for being a jerk or an a-hole or entitled or mean or manipulative or gaslighty or attention seeking. Like, let me hold back because they did help me in a pinch. You may feel that because they bailed you out of a crisis, that you aren't allowed to take a holistic view of them. And, this is the tough part. If indeed this is a toxic and antagonistic, manipulative, narcissistic person, they may almost guarantee that they will weaponize their whole, here I come to save the day aspects of themselves. They really believe like, I came in to save the day. So this crisis-motivated narcissist most often can get filed under a communal narcissistic presentation. I've always said that these communal narcissistic folks can be quite interesting because interestingly, they're often not there for you and in any consistent or predictable manner during regular life. Like if you needed a normal garden variety, not special, not emergency favor, or if doing the favor didn't serve them, they're not going to find time for other people. And they may also obviously, they're narcissistic. They're going to have all the other narcissistic things, selfish, grandiose, attention-seeking, dysregulated, manipulative, all of it. But what I'm going to call these communal crisis narcissists is a very specific subset. These communal crisis narcissists, they love an emergency. They come in like some kind of gaslighting Red Cross and let everyone know, I cleared my schedule to be here for you at this difficult time because it's an emergency. And like they really are like, look at me, let me tie up that cape around my neck. They'll remind you like, oh, I woke up at dawn. I answered all my emails. I'm the boss, so I could run my schedule the way I want. But I was able to do all of that and be here for you at this very difficult time. Just letting you know I'm very important and I'm very in demand, but I did all this for you. And they say it loudly so other people can hear it. So now you're kind of throwing up in your mouth that you're having to get help from this person, but you're desperate for help. So the only thing worse than going through a crisis, loss, grief, emergency is going through a crisis, loss, grief, emergency, and feeling beholden to someone who keeps reminding you how much they are inconvenienced by having to help you, but they still keep doing it, keep drawing attention to it. And the transaction in all of this is that you tell them and and other people tell them how great this person is for coming in and saving the day, and you have to listen to how much they are having to give up to help you, even when you no longer need or want their help. This entire transaction feels gross, and it can often complicate your healing afterwards. Because if you do tell them after that desperate initial part of like, okay, I'll take their help, you say, hey, you know what? I'm all set. Really, you can go now. Thank you so much. Then they may do the whole victim passive-aggressive thing. It's as though they get their energy, they get their life force from doing the whole martyr thing, sharing with wide audiences how much they're sacrificing to help you in your crisis. But if you were to ask them to no longer help you, like, because you don't want to listen to this anymore, then they play the victim. And on top of all of this, you are going through a very difficult time yourself. And it's always messy when you have to rely on any person like this who has one of these personalities, but they're often the ones who come in the most strongly with this help. Now, what's interesting about the communal crisis narcissists is that they are often quite good at what I'm going to call performative logistics. They kind of get off on your crisis. It's the whole like, I know a guy who can take care of this kind of thing. I got contacts who can help with that. Again, in and of itself, people who can keep a cool head and get things done, I agree that that's great in a crisis, but that's not this. This communal crisis narcissist thing are people who are actually often quite difficult, perhaps downright toxic or narcissistic, but in this moment of your desperation, they're the ones who want to come in for the hero shot, and you may need their help. This can feel really rough if you've already done some real boundary setting, disengagement, hell, even in some cases, maybe some no contact or really low contact. And then the crisis happens and you're really trying to figure out what to do and how to get some help in something that you may not be able to manage alone. What communal crisis narcissists are not good at is reading the room. And that's mostly because they don't care. The performative crisis response, that's their thing. That's the communal crisis narcissist thing. Crises allow this type of narcissist to play at being savior, rescuer, martyr. I mean, ordinary things like picking you up from the car repair place when you need to get a brake job, or just keeping their mouths shut at the holiday dinner table. That's not that marquee martyr stuff they like. But in the middle of a huge emergency, that's their stage. And what that means is that your emotions in the midst of a real crisis that you're trying to manage, raw as they may be, your emotions won't be regarded in any way. If anything, the communal crisis narcissist may even get a little bit prickly and crunchy and surly with you if you aren't snapping out of it. Get out of that grief, or thanking them enough, or noticing what they're doing. You may have lost 3 family members and they'll come up to you and say, hey, come on, cheer up. Can't you see everything I'm doing for you? Nobody would ever do this for me. I'm taking off time from work to do this. So can't you see that all I'm doing for you? And this kind of idiocy is supposed to make you feel better, according to these people. And so this can all set up a unique form of fuckery in terms of a trauma bond. In a crisis, where grief and trauma responses abound, which they often do, we are raw. And in those crisis situations, typically we are looking for safety and some form of consistency. Sometimes we look for safety in unsafe places because our survival needs are at the top of the chain. And that can often look like basic level needs or logistics, or someone just having to come in and take care of everything because you are so emotionally overwhelmed. So when this is done by the performative communal crisis narcissist, well, the price of admission, and there's always a price of admission in a narcissistic relationship, is basically them making a really dark moment in your life about them, because of course everything is about them. And that means things like you have to listen to their nonsense, and even sometimes having to fake your emotions and moods, and not only find yourself falling into that fawn trauma response to stay safe, but you may also engage in volitional fawning, what I call fluffing. Like, wow, you're that best. Gosh, no one's more helpful than you, just to ensure that this self-serving savior sticks around because you're so desperate for their help. The challenge with responses like fawning or fluffing, or frankly, any of the trauma responses, is that while they keep us alive and connected and attached, and may even get us out of perceived danger, or we somatically feel that we're out of danger, is that our trauma responses sadly can often leave us filled with shame afterwards. All of you fawners, and I'm right there with you, you know what I'm talking about. But it's the same even if our responses freeze or flee or frankly even fight. So when we feel that we had to sort of debase ourselves to keep this communal crisis narcissist engaged, to get their help and compliment them when all we wanted to do is crawl in a hole, it can not only impede our healing, it can get us locked into a pretty bad trauma-bonded cycle whereby we devalue and criticize ourselves for being bad people, for thinking bad things about the very person who came in and saved the day. Even though they did it in a self-serving way, we feel that we are the jerks and the monsters for viewing them that way. And this can keep us stuck in relationships with them, perhaps even feeling like we have to pay off some sort of karmic or dharmic bet to them. And that may simply look like we have to continue to listen to their grandiose prattle or kiss their proverbial communal narcissistic ring and effusively thank them every time we hear from them. Or may, in the worst cases, depending on how little support you have, you may still have to rely on their support. And remember, they keep doing it not to help you, but to pump up this sense of saviorness in you. Now, it may still help you, but that's not their motivation. And all this other stuff, like them telling everyone what a savior they are, is sort of, again, that price of admission. And people may say, even years later, about these folks, they'll say, oh, I'm such a bad person. This person helped me so much when my kid was sick, or when our house burned down, or when my dad died, and now I don't want anything to do with them. Am I a user? No, you aren't. This communal crisis narcissist is tough because you are clear-headed in seeing it straight. And in situations like this, seeing it straight is uncomfortable as hell. Communal crisis narcissists love an emergency, and they love drawing attention to their emergency response, and may even wear their willingness to help other people in crisis as badges of honor. Like, look at what I've done for all of these people. The world at large that isn't seeing close up what's happening may prop them up and say, oh my gosh, they do so much. They give so much. They did so much for this one and that one. And you would be shocked at how much goodwill that can get the communal crisis narcissist. And I have watched countless people go through this dynamic, or I've been told about these situations. It is interesting. This one is now personal for me. I recently had to navigate this. I've gone through massive traumatic losses in my life recently, and I've experienced this firsthand. And I watch myself, the desperation, my fluffing, my fawning, and then having to be an audience to this kind of narcissistic prattle of not just one, but more than one communal crisis narcissist. And then frankly, the disgust, and in some cases, horror at the dichotomy of having to endure the BS to get absolutely essential help, and then feeling like I had to take like one of those psychological showers like people have to do when they're exposed to radioactivity to wash off the shame of having to engage in this way. The decision-making sequence afterwards isn't easy, because sometimes you recognize that at that time, and maybe even on an ongoing basis, the communal crisis narcissist was serving an important need. And you may even find that really distancing, disengaging, or even cutting them out means that the tasks that they were doing aren't done as well, or now you're the one running yourself more ragged. So only you know what works for you. For me, personally, cleaning out narcissistic folks is so important that I was willing to go into debt and physical exhaustion to no longer engage. I'll let you know when I keel over. But if you don't, won't, or can't, that's okay. The key with managing narcissistic relationships is seeing it clearly. Because seeing it clearly for what it is, so you don't blame yourself, shame yourself, judge yourself, or abandon yourself, that's the part that's crucial. So in a crisis, sometimes you got to take the help, but you got to recognize the strings. Listen, throw them their mini parade. Recognize that they will play victim if you don't thank them enough, and ensure that you also get yourself some healthy supports, even if it's down the road, to help you navigate things like loss, trauma, and grief. Crisis is often a place of re-engagement and also a place of reinvigorating trauma bonds. Sometimes we have to hold on to anything to keep from sinking. That's survival. One day, you will get back to shore. And the communal crisis narcissist will have notched another savior martyr notch in their belt. And then you, for yourself, hopefully separate from them, can start the longer term work of healing, discernment, and the painful wisdom that none of us wish we had to learn. But unless you're really lucky, it is very rare to live a crisis-free life. Thanks again.